Today's episode is with Lily Chau.
So secure defaults is where you set up AWS organizations with CloudTrail, Guard Duty, least privilege, IAM roles, and all the possible complex misconfigurations that they can have. It's tough to be a developer. Prioritization is hard, and also knowing what to fix is hard. So if the only record you have for a subdomain are NS records, so nothing else. So no TXT records, no CNAME records, no A records. When they are triggered, it's because of a human. So that EC2 should be quarantined by security groups. And simultaneously, you want to observe a decrease in policy violations. Automation also is about remediating inactive resources. And I'm sure I'm not the only person in the industry who was getting pretty fed up with knowing all the issues in your environment.
Hi everyone, this is Purushottam and thanks for tuning into ScaletoZero podcast. Today's episode is with Lily Chau. She's a little blob inhaling copious amounts of food and is often seen riding a warp star. She is a silent spirit using lots of grunts, shouts, and cheery elongated monosyllables. She was previously known as a platypus caretaker. Lily, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining with me.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Lou. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. But yeah, so basically, if you didn't get that, I'm a Kirby. And yes, I used to run the Platypus Con hands-on workshop only hacker conference back in Sydney. And now I'm your friendly neighborhood security janitor at Roku. So I break things, I fix things. Sometimes I pretend to be a developer.
I love that intro. So before we start, we generally ask our guests to share about their journey. Do you want to highlight about your journey? How did you start, and what does what do you do nowadays?
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief because my journey is actually fairly boring. I'm a self-taught hacker who has pivoted to building security tools because, yeah, it's frustrating being on the reactive side of security instead of the proactive side, which has a much higher impact on the company.
Absolutely. What does your day to day look like nowadays? So we generally ask this question to our guests, and we get unique answers because everyone's day will never be same, right? Not all, everyone's day will be same.
Yeah, so let's see. I wake up and I reply to about 50 Slack messages, but I don't read emails. So when you're so low on time, you essentially have to choose what to be bad at. And I made a conscious decision to be bad at emails so that I can focus on other things. So, so then I spend a good amount of time reminding people to fix security issues or informing people that, hey, I'm introducing this new technical control that might cause disruptions, so fix your systems. And I'm actually creating a nagging bot to help me out with all of this. I also tackle some tech debt, but most of my
Mhm.
time is dedicated to more complex project work that typically spans 2 to 3 months of time.
Okay. So one of the things that I have seen with guests is some guests do not do when they wake up, no Slack, no email, nothing. Till the time they, like, let's say, go to a gym or they go for a run, and after that they start. Some do everything and then go to the gym or workout. And you have found a balance that you will do Slack but not email. So that's a unique way of starting your day.
Yep.
Uh, so today we are going to talk about you highlighted fixes, right? So today we are going to talk about remediations and particularly in AWS. So let's dive into it. So this year at B-Sides SF, you presented the topic Whizbang Lambda Fix, where AWS misconfigurations meet auto fix it antics, focusing on remediations, particularly auto remediations. Before we dig deep into the topic, let's start with some basics, right? How does remediation and auto remediation in particular play a role in organizations' cloud security program?
Right. So first, I want to dial back and say When tackling security issues in AWS, you have the first track, which you should absolutely do first, is the secure default track. And that's where, and then you have the auto-remediation track. So secure defaults is where you set up AWS organizations with CloudTrail, GuardDuty, least privilege, IAM roles. It's where you set up the service control policies, and it's where you have thousands of secure by default templates. So if there are any issues, it's in the code, which you
Hmm.
can scan for, block, and correct via drift detection. So the second track is somehow controlling the manual click operations outside of approved infrastructure as code workflows. So we do this via both scheduled and real-time remediation of these manual
Hmm.
actions. So some examples are quarantining EC2s that are manually spun up,
Hmm.
and also performing residual remediation of manual deletion of elastic beanstalk or load balancers, which can introduce subdomain takeover vulnerabilities.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
in a nutshell, I would say auto remediation is about fixing security issues that arise from manual actions. So, that's more opposed to the traditional bug fixing where you file a Jira ticket and you're done, or you send a
Mhm.
Slack alert and you're done. So, yeah, auto remediation is about going beyond Jira and going beyond Slack and actually fixing the issue.
So you touched on the first thing that you highlighted is secure by default, right? And I love that because most companies sometimes just try to be reactive. That hey, there is something popping up, we'll fix it, but they don't go back and set the foundation right. So in a way, with secure by default, you're doing the foundation right. On top of that, if there are drifts, you're fixing them using auto remediation.
Yeah.
You touched on IAC as well, so we'll cover that in a bit. But yeah, I love that you started with the basics, that you have to have your foundations correct. Um, a follow up question that comes to my mind is, uh, what benefits do I get by doing auto remediation for cloud security?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you're finally fixing that security issue, but you're also fixing it at scale while streamlining that remediation process. So we don't need to worry about resource and time constraints within teams, and we don't need to worry about developers needing a strong security expertise,
Hmm.
given like the growing number of AWS services and all the possible complex misconfigurations that they can have. Yeah, it's tough to be a developer.
Totally. So I love that you highlighted that time constraints, right? Because when it comes to developers, like their primary focus is to build, ship out new features. On top of that, we are asking them to do security things. Now, auto remediation is another thing, right? So prioritization is often a big challenge for security teams. And in that bucket, if we bring in auto remediation as well, that adds another layer of in a way challenges, right, for the security team. Well, now when I'm doing the prioritization, let's say I'm in the security team, I'm doing the prioritization, what factors should I consider to determine which area to focus on for my remediation work?
Yeah, so prioritization is hard, and also knowing what to fix is hard.
Hmm.
So I will detour and say, so let's say you buy a cloud tool
Hmm.
and you get millions of findings, but then you get stuck. Like, what do I do with these findings? Okay, I need to remediate them, but how do I do that? Or what do you remediate that will make a significant impact? Because we are time and resource constrained. And then when you look across the industry, what you start to notice is that the only thing people fix and the only thing that people like jump up and down about are public S3 buckets. So you basically bought a tool to fix public S3 buckets.
Yes.
So yes, I get that. Knowing what to fix and what to prioritize is hard. Or when you do know what to prioritize, you might know how to fix it for one system,
Hmm.
but how do you fix it systemically for the whole organization? So when prioritizing, you need to choose based on your security maturity, the categories you want to fix. So that's security misconfigurations, cost optimization, threat detection, reducing attack surface, or is it placing guardrails on policy violations?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll break down the high impact ones. So for
Mm-hmm.
security misconfigurations, you want to focus on preventable controls or detective controls for critical vulnerabilities such as server-side request forgery, SSRF, remote code execution, credential exfiltration. So that's anything related to IMDS v1 in
Mm-hmm.
your EC2s, auto scaling groups, AMIs, EKS. So this is like the single best thing you can do to reduce the risk of SSRF attacks.
Right.
So yeah. And then the next thing is to focus next example is Route 53
Mm-hmm.
because you want to prevent subdomain takeover and hosted zone takeover. So one example where if you only have a record, if the only record you have for a subdomain are NS records, like
Mm-hmm.
so nothing else. So no TXT records, no CNAME records, no A records, then you just want to delete the whole thing. And that mitigates the risk of future DNS zone takeover.
Yes, yes. I love that. Very specifically, you highlighted NS record, right? Often we ignore that. Hey, there is one entry for NS record. Yeah, maybe it's okay, but it makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Please continue.
Yeah, it's like one of the few examples. It's like, yes, you should clean up your things because it can lead to a vulnerability. And it's so weird. It's like, oh, but it's not used. But you don't know that. That's why you need to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, yeah,
On
the
the
other
thread.
category. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, the category for threat detection.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, there is always a possibility for false positives.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you require a Slack user response before you move your workflow onto remediation.
Mm.
And you want to focus on things, on threats that are high signal, low noise. So some examples, Cloud Shell, if you detect someone downloading secrets, more likely than not, it's an attacker.
Mm-hmm.
Honeypots. So in our environment, we place AWS honeypot keys everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
when they are triggered, it's because of a human. So that EC2 should be quarantined by security groups. And so one thing to note is that the indicators of compromise for threat detection quickly go out of date. So it's important to focus on the attacker tactics that cause the most damage, such as credential exfiltration.
So I love how you like broke it down, right? Misconfigurations, threats, and then subdomain takeover, attack surface, and things like that. And I was thinking it will be just I'll just click a button and everything is fixed, but it looks like there is more work. So if like since there is a lot of work to be done, right, when it comes to remediation, for organizations who are investing in it, how do they measure the impact of it and even the return on investment for these remediation type of work?
Yeah, so you basically want to compare the results of the two tracks. So
Hmm.
the secure default track and the auto
Hmm.
remediation track.
Hmm.
So you want to measure the increase in secure default setups, which should go up ideally, and simultaneously you want to like observe a decrease in policy violations from your auto remediation of manual click operations. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the dual track approach to ensure like you're comprehensive and effective enough for the cloud. So when tracking, so for track one, the metrics you want to track how many bug classes you've eliminated and the percentage of coverage across your code base. So, for example, let's say you've remediated the bug class cross-site scripting
Hmm.
across your code base. You also want to track the adoption rate of your infrastructure as code templates with
Hmm.
predefined guardrails, predefined CI/CD templates that that scan and block critical misconfigurations from
Right.
being pushed into production. And I think also it helps that if you have like a bug bounty program or penetration testing engagements to help verify that hey, the system was compromised, but in that compromised state, in that virtual machine, in that pod, with that gained user role, can you do anything?
That's a good way to validate both the areas, right? Secure by default, you see increase in number of policies that you are defining, or the foundation, you're getting better at the foundation, and at the same time, how many, like the number of remediations are they going down? Because if they continue to go up, that means your defaults are not where they should be, right? In a way, uh, makes sense. You touched on ISE pipelines a little bit, so I want to dig deeper into that area. So this, like in June, I was at Forward Cloud site, and there was a birds of feather, like which is a off-camera discussion session, which was around why can't auto remediations work. And some of the points discussed were, the first one was, as an organization, we follow IAC. Like you touched on IAC, right? Like you should do more things on IAC. So the question was around, as an organization, we follow IAC for managing our cloud resources. Why should we focus on auto remediation in that case? Shouldn't we be investing more on the IAC front rather than the auto remediation front? What's your take on that?
Yeah. So, as I was kind of hinting at, tackling security in the cloud does require a dual approach. So,
Hmm.
focusing on track one, security through defaults and guardrails, alongside track two, which is addressing like the policy violations or the invariant resources via auto remediation. So, like, yes, definitely, you should be investing heavily on infrastructure as code as part of track one,
Hmm.
and track two is about automating manual click operations outside of infrastructure as code. So we see it all the time, like edge cases for technical control are too strict, or
Hmm.
technical controls like they don't cover every scenario. So let's go to a really simple example. Like why are people spinning up EC2s manually? We have the secure by default Terraform template and the predefined CI/CD template for people to spin up EC2s. So
Hmm.
why are they still doing it manually? And then you hear things like, I just want to spin up something really quickly, like for test purposes. Or I'm new to AWS, I'm more familiar with Docker and Kubernetes, and I still don't understand this service mesh golden standard that you're pushing on me. So there's always edge cases, even for
Hmm.
things you don't even think about, like encryption everywhere, that
Hmm.
there's also an edge case. So basically, if you're going to spin up an EC2, which you know is going to happen, you just want to make sure you are doing it securely.
Hmm.
So while you learn the golden standard, the service mesh, and make a plan to migrate, let's make sure the manual click operations doesn't introduce vulnerabilities that we can't live with.
Hmm.
So that's the track two that I am talking about.
Right.
So remediating or reducing the impact of vulnerabilities introduced via manual actions.
Hmm.
But like auto remediation is also about the containment of the most common compromise types. So quarantining an EC2, quarantining credentials, applying public access blocks during a compromise. And automation also is about remediating inactive resources.
Right.
So removing inactive IAM roles after a predefined time period, removing unused privileges, disabling any kind of security credentials that have found to been compromised or leaked.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So,
So, oh,
sorry, continue.
so I was going to say for track one, there's also a piece for auto remediation as well. So you
Hmm.
do need to automatically correct deviations from known good state in production and to restore the original configuration defined in your infrastructure as code. And that applies to correcting IAM drift and
Hmm.
also correcting IAM drift in Kubernetes. So, like, you know, you can have remediations on both sides technically.
Hmm. You highlighted that uh, even though you have the best practice, like you have secure by default ISA templates, everything in place for your developers, sometimes they might spin up servers which are slightly out of compliance. I'm using the term compliance broadly, but like out of what your standards, right? Baseline standards. Uh, how can that be avoided, that your developers don't even do that? Do you think that's not possible because sometimes they want to move fast and they just do it, or there are better approaches that organizations can take so that the number of such issues reduce?
The thing is, it's always going to happen. And so for example, for us, it's
Hmm.
okay if it's a production AWS account or GCP project, then we only allow changes via infrastructure as code, so that, yeah, you
Makes
can't push
sense.
manual changes. And the only way you can have manual updates is in sandbox environments. So
Hmm.
then what ends up happening is people put their production workloads in sandbox environments, or in the production environment, you still need a break glass in case something happens, something
Right.
breaks down. So it's like, okay, you need to jump into this break glass account to restart manually or edit something manually. So it's unfortunately it's yeah, you need, yeah, what you were saying, you do need to strike a balance
Hmm.
between security and speed of features.
Right. Right. I was hoping that we will get there someday where there is no manual work; it's all IAC. But I guess we are far from it right now. Uh,
Yeah.
Another question which was raised during that session was, auto remediation cannot be applied to all types of assets and all types of misconfigurations. Especially, let's say, some AWS rolls out a new service. By the time you write auto remediation and things like that, it takes a little bit of time, right? It takes a bit of time to catch up. And if that's the case, if we are not 100% covered, should we look at better alternatives than auto remediation?
Right. So this kind of goes back to needing both tracks, the
Mm-hmm.
track one secure defaults and the track two auto-remediation for manual actions.
Mm-hmm.
So track one can cover all your assets if they're in infrastructure as code, and that's the aim of track one. And the aim of track two is to provide a good enough coverage against
Mm.
high impact compromise. So you don't want to waste time on remediating low hanging fruits as part of track two, for example. You also want to prevent issues you know are high in true positive rates.
Mm-hmm.
So, so to kind of reiterate, ultimately, yeah, prevention significantly reduces the gap between the large attack surface and our limited remediation capabilities. But since there will always be edge cases,
Mm-hmm.
auto remediation is there, and it's there to activate in those exceptional circumstances where immediate corrective actions are necessary.
Okay. Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. A follow up question that I have on that is, let's say I'm now convinced that yes, I need to invest in auto remediation, and I want to start as an organization. We want to start like building the auto remediation framework. What should I be prepared for? Like, what kind of challenges I might face while designing the auto remediation program, or even while working on it? And if you can provide any examples that you might have seen at Roku, that will help connect the dots.
Yeah, so my biggest challenge was probably company buy-in. And I'm sure I'm not the only person in the industry who was getting pretty fed up with knowing all the issues in your environment,
Hmm.
and nothing changes like year over year. It's the
Yeah.
same vulnerabilities. And they're not going down. Like if anything, they're going up. So and when new incidents happen, it's like it's the same issue that's coming up over and over again.
Hmm.
And yeah, despite all your best efforts in like writing a super detailed Jira ticket outlining like exactly how to mediate step by step, like the timely resolution of that issue is still a problem. So this is where you collect metrics to show
Hmm.
how horrible our mean our mean time to remediate is.
Hmm.
And so with that, it becomes a lot easier to convince people, hey, maybe you should give the security team a shot. You know, let us take the reins and start applying remediation ourselves because,
Hmm.
yeah, security professionals are uniquely positioned to identify,
Hmm.
understand, and also remediate those configurations. Another challenge is balancing that prevention versus auto remediation, or track one versus track two. So, yes, prevention is the only thing that can significantly improve the difference between your attack surface and your small remediation capacity. So yeah, at first it may seem like the best approach is to deploy as many auto remediations as possible to
Hmm.
maximize your coverage. But you should be focusing on building preventative measures and remediations that cover enough of the attack surface that it's unlikely a developer will make like a beginner noob mistake, and
Right.
unlikely for an attacker to find a path through your network without triggering at least one of your alarms. So yeah, ideally, remediation shouldn't fire unless something goes really, really wrong.
So you highlighted buy-in, right? You didn't talk about technical controls and things like that. What other stakeholders do you see you interact with as part of this process? I was thinking it would be just security team, right? I'll just work on auto remediation scripts and we are done. What other stakeholders do I need to work with?
Yeah, so well, the security team, the
Hmm.
cloud infrastructure team, and all your developers across the organization. So the security team will drive the success of the auto remediation efforts.
Hmm.
So outlining the streamlined remediation process for each issue.
Hmm.
The cloud infrastructure team will ensure the Terraform, stack sets, IAM least privileged permissions are set up
Hmm.
and configured to perform automation across all AWS accounts. And so for developers, you essentially want to get their buy-in because it's their workflows that are being impacted.
Right.
So yeah, the goal is to enable them to ship code faster. But with the track one secure defaults, they can ship that code faster without needing to worry about infrastructure and without needing to worry about security. So yeah, basically making the secure way easy for
Hmm.
them and the insecure way harder for them to do.
Love that. So we spoke about challenges. We spoke about who are the stakeholders. Now, since you have like implemented this, what recommendations do you have for organizations who want to start working on auto remediation?
Yeah, so my recommendation is to collect metrics for the mean time to resolve and collect metrics for the track one secure defaults in comparison like to the track two auto remediation. You also want to show to the company that you are moving to the golden standard, and that could just be the generic secure by default standard. It could be the Istio microservices as the standard, or some other form of golden standard. So then you are basically showing progress in three areas. So
Hmm.
for new services, that they automatically adopt that service mesh architecture for
Hmm.
better availability, scalability, security.
Hmm.
Uh, for existing services, you want to show that you're migrating to that golden service mesh architecture while while ensuring like uninterrupted service for business continuity.
Hmm.
And then you have the progress on everything else, new and existing, that bypasses your service mesh adoption. So that's like spinning up your EC2s manually, containerizing your applications with Docker and Kubernetes, using AWS Lambda or other platforms as a service to deploy your applications, such as Heroku.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, while it's technically possible to securely deploy applications in those non-approved environments,
Right.
it's uncommon, and more often than not, like such practices are manual and they introduce security vulnerabilities.
Right, right. I like how you structured, right? Again, first of all, define where you want to get to, like the golden standard, and then you have metrics so that you find out what is your current state and then how you are progressing, so that that way you know whether you are getting value out of the process or not, and what type of value you are getting out of it as well. So yeah, I really like how you structured it. So one of the things in the prioritization you mentioned is around threats, right? So and cloud security threats are constantly evolving. So keeping that in mind, um, how can auto-remediation solutions for AWS keep up to the latest security vulnerabilities? Like you touched on IMDS V1. So similarly, let's say some other vulnerability comes up. How do you stay up to date, and how does the auto remediation program stay up to date to these things?
Yeah. So yes. So yeah, threats are indeed constantly changing, and so staying ahead requires like a dynamic and proactive approach.
Hmm.
So to keep the auto remediations update, you need so number one, continuous monitoring and threat intelligence integration. So you want to regularly integrate your threat intelligence feed and security advisory into your monitoring systems. So that will help in identifying new vulnerabilities and attack patterns.
Hmm.
Number two is AI driven analysis. So you need to leverage AI and machine learning to analyze logs and detect anomalies. And that will help determine, like with a really high confidence, that a compromise or a 0 day has happened.
Hmm.
And those AI insights can also help inform your automation strategies. And the third is regular updates and patching. So ensuring that your automation scripts are regularly updated to include patches for those newly discovered vulnerabilities.
Speaking of AI, um, how do you see the future of auto remediations? Do you see a lot of AI helping us, let's say, writing auto remediation or even enforcing some of the baselines? How do you see AI being used in the remediation space?
Yeah, so I think the future of automation on AWS is well positioned to become much more sophisticated
Hmm.
with AI. So, with advanced AI and machine learning, um, it will help play a greater role in identifying and remediating security issues in general. So, those future auto remediation solutions will not only be able to detect anomalies, but possibly predict potential threats based on the patterns and behaviors that allows you to do preemptive auto remediation actions.
Hmm.
Um, I think we can expect more self healing systems. So, um, with so basically, where you automatically correct vulnerabilities and configuration issues without human interventions because
Hmm.
of AI.
Hmm.
And those systems can use like predictive analysis to anticipate and address problems before they even kind of become threats.
Hmm.
And I think,
That would make our life super easy, right?
yes. I think I also envision like better integration with the DevSecOps pipeline.
Right.
So it will be more play a more important part of the pipeline, ensuring security is baked into every stage of the development cycle, and it
Hmm.
will streamline like all the processes of deploying secure applications and infrastructure.
Right.
And probably one last thing is policy driven remediation so that your organization can define the policies and it will just be enforced automatically.
Yeah, makes sense. So we spoke about how AI will make our life easy, right? We'll get better remediation, policy-driven remediations, and some of the self-healing aspects of it. At the same time, there are challenges with AI as well, right? That there could be more security risks coming from AI. So how do you think about that?
Yeah,
Or do you
so
even think about that? Do you even worry about that? Or you're like, no, AI will do it for me?
right, yeah. So I guess overall, I am very excited about AI as it applies to security. So yeah, maybe I'm not too worried when you can have so much more benefits. So
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, we can have like enhanced threat detection where AI can analyze your traffic, your user behavior, your logs
Hmm.
to identify anomalies that may indicate a security threat.
Right.
And so that means like quicker identification, remediation of potential breaches.
Hmm.
um, the systems will be more adaptive because maybe AI can learn from the past incidents and adapt the security measures like accordingly. So
Hmm.
as new threats emerge, the system becomes more resilient and it just continuously improves its defenses. Oh, and
Right.
one of the challenges in security operations is the high number of false positives. So
Yes.
AI can significantly reduce these by better distinguishing between like benign anomalies and actual threats. So yeah, and then this reduction would just help security teams focus on more genuine critical security issues and
Yeah.
maybe like automating incident response process from detection to containment to remediation. So yeah, basically with AI, I think organizations can shift from a more reactive to a proactive security posture.
Right.
Um, Predictive analytics may also be able to forecast potential attack vectors
Hmm.
and allow teams to better adapt our defenses before an attack occurs.
I'm glad that you're not worried about AI taking over everything and
I mean,
driving us
how
nuts.
cool would that happen if that was the case? I think it would be amazing.
Let's hope that doesn't happen in our lifetime.
Yeah.
So yeah, that brings us to the end of the security questions. One last question around security is, like, generally most organizations follow some sort of cybersecurity framework, right? Um, so I'm curious, any particular cybersecurity framework that you have used or that you have worked with, and you like the policies and you like the program overall. Any thoughts on that?
Mm. So I guess a good starting point, or and a boring point, is the NIST framework as a
Mhm.
base reference point. So if you know nothing, it provides like a good holistic view over all areas from detecting, responding, and recovering from incidents. But it is very important to customize it to your company and take a more risk-based approach to the
Mhm.
framework, and also to pay attention to recent significant threats, because these are what need to be addressed first. So I
Right.
would say, yeah, NIST has been helpful to me as a base roadmap for improving our security posture, but you do need to be flexible and adapt to those new threats as they come out.
Love that. Love how you structured it. Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the security questions. Thanks, Lily, for the insightful conversation. Here is a summary from our conversation. First one is, there are two essentials to focus in cloud security. First one is strong security foundations or baselines for preventative measures, and remediations for drifts from a reactive measure standpoint. The second one is, biggest challenge with remediation programs is buy-in from other stakeholders like engineering, DevOps, and leadership. And to get buy-in, show them the current MTTR, mean time to respond, and versus the future gold standard that you want to attain. The last one is, prioritization of remediation is correlated with security maturity of the organization. Uh, in areas like misconfiguration, threat intel, attack surface, amongst others. The more mature the organization, the better the outcomes of the remediations would be. Thank you. So next one is rating security practices. This is where you have to rate. You have to give a rating between 1 to 5, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. And you can add context why you gave a particular rating. So let's start with the first one. Uh, the first one is, conduct periodic security audits to identify vulnerabilities, threats, and weaknesses in your systems and applications.
Okay, so I'm interpreting your security audits as manual,
Hmm.
and for that, I would rate that as a 3 out of 5.
Okay.
So basically, my stance is we want to solve as many problems as possible with secure defaults. And
Hmm.
in order to get the best value from a security audit, it needs to identify advanced or complex bugs, not like the low and medium stuff. Because yeah, we're not trying to identify every bug. Bugs will always exist, especially given like the rapid pace at which new threats emerge.
Right.
And also we don't have the resources to fix every bug that you're going to identify.
Hmm.
So unless you're finding really complex advanced bugs, like performing manual security audits, I would prioritize those.
Makes sense. The second one is, provide training and awareness programs to employees to help them identify and respond to potential security threats?
Yeah, so I would give this a 2 out of 5.
Okay.
So while it's a widely common practice, there are limitations to this approach. So, okay, when it comes to phishing, like users will always be vulnerable. Like
Mm-hmm.
even the most seasoned security professionals can fall victim
Mm-hmm.
if they get caught on a bad day.
Yes.
So yes, it's essential to teach security basics
Mm-hmm.
to users. So, knowing how to scrutinize a domain, verifying the sender address, and be wary of unexpected requests for sensitive information or money. But beyond those basics, um, detecting sophisticated security threats require a level of technical knowledge that most users don't have. So, expecting users to then be able to identify and respond to them is a little unrealistic. So, I think this is where it's more important to have technical controls. So, things like antivirus, email filtering,
Yes.
automated threat detection systems, which are far more reliable in identifying and mitigating security threats. And mitigating them like continuously and processing large amounts of data, which
Mm-hmm.
a human can easily miss one.
Yeah. uh, yeah, like one example is the spam filters in emails, right? We often don't see so many emails which are spam, and if we get those emails, we'll not be able to distinguish whether it's a spam or not, because
Mm.
attackers are super smart as well, right? So yeah, totally, like training plus the tooling, both need to
Yes.
go hand in hand. uh, the last one is DevOps practices are needed to move fast and deploy code to production. We'll focus on security later, or security is not the most important right now.
So I would probably give this a 2 out of 5 if you already got my drift. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's understandable that security practices might slow things down, but it is important to strike a balance between that speed and security to ensure like long-term success and stability. So to balance that security and speed, there are a few more less okay, strategies that don't hinder the developer that much.
Mm-hmm.
So, shift left to incorporate security early in the development process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Automation in terms of scanning and blocking security checks in the CI/CD pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
and then your secure by default code templates. So if you bake in all your guardrails in the code templates and in the pipeline, developers can just focus on shipping code in the application layer
Right.
without needing to worry about security and without needing to learn about the infrastructure layer.
So thus making their life easy, right? They're just focusing
Mhm.
on their own work in a way. They're not
Yeah.
spending a lot of cycles thinking about security best practices and doing things like that, because those are abstracted in a way for
Yes,
them. Yeah,
exactly.
love that. So that's a great way to end the section. But before we end the episode, I have one last question, which is any recommendation that you have, reading recommendation. It can be a blog or a book or podcast or anything.
Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit out of the box
Mm-hmm.
and recommend a book outside of security.
Sure.
So that's Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Mhm.
So the book talks about the idea that effective leadership and also like good professional relationships and good personal relationships require vulnerability and empathy. So it's a very practical book, like giving examples about actual insights and strategies, which kind of what we spoke about previously, that without someone listing specific examples, it's really hard to know like what to fix, what to think about, and like
Yes.
what to prioritize essentially.
Hmm. Oh, thank you so much for sharing this book name. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Renee Brown as well. Like I have watched her TED talks. The first one was, I think, the power of vulnerability or something, right? And
Yeah.
that was so impactful. Like when I saw that, so many things made sense, right? Because as humans, we sometimes don't think about vulnerability that much. We don't want to feel vulnerable, even, right? So it talks about how it's a superpower and not something you should be afraid of, right? So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that book as a recommendation.
Yeah, thanks for. I can't believe I was very surprised that you know of her and agree. So I'm so glad.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
were not
absolutely.
robots in this industry.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, that's a great way to end the episode as well. Thank you so much, Lily, for taking the time and joining with us and sharing your knowledge and insights with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to our audience, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next episode. Thank you.